Who was Genghis Khan, really? Was he the bloodthirsty savage we see in cartoons, a monster who piled up pyramids of skulls? Or was he the guy who created the world's first real free trade zone, the first international postal system, and a system of law so powerful it even applied to himself? To really understand the world we live in, we have to go inside the mind that built it.
We're going to start right here with a seriously provocative statement. This quote frames Genghis Khan not as some dusty figure from a history book, but as a live wire in today's debate about power, about morality, and what it actually takes to change the world. It forces you to ask a really uncomfortable question. At the end of the day, is raw, brutal strength the only thing that actually matters?
And that right there is the absolute heart of what we're going to explore. We need to get past the caricature of the barbarian on a horse. We're going to get inside the mind of a man who, at the same time, was a peerless destroyer and one of history's most radical lawmakers. The blade and the law. That's the puzzle we're going to try and solve today.
So here's our roadmap. First, we're going to step into the brutal world that made him. Then, we'll see how 5 specific traumas from his childhood became the actual blueprints for his empire. We'll decode his mental operating system, everything from his spiritual beliefs to his strategic genius. Then, we'll look at him through a brilliant African intellectual lens to see a pattern that repeats across history. And finally, we'll confront the incredibly messy world he left behind.
You can't understand the man until you understand the world that created him. So let's go back. Let's build the world of the 12th century Mongolian steppe. And to really get the mindset of the people there, we've got to start with an idea from ancient Greece, and then flip it completely on its head.
So, a lot of you have probably heard of Plato's cave, right? The idea of these prisoners chained underground watching shadows on a wall and thinking that's reality? Well, let's just flip that whole idea over. What if these so-called advanced civilizations, with their big walls, their rigid rules, their comfortable beliefs, what if they were the ones trapped in the cave? And what if the nomads, who were constantly moving across the vast, unfiltered reality of the steppe, watching the world as it actually was, what if they were the ones who were truly free? That's our starting point. The Mongols weren't primitive, they just had a different and maybe even clearer way of seeing things.
And the reality they saw in the year 1162 was pure chaos. I mean, there's no such thing as Mongolia. It doesn't exist. There are just these warring clans and families in a constant, violent fight to survive. Loyalty? It's a fragile thing, tied only to blood, and even you can't trust that. There's no police, no courts, no higher law. There is only strength. It's a world where your neighbor might kill you, and the winter itself is a weapon that could wipe out your entire family. Into this world, a boy named Temujin is born. Now the story, the one the Mongols themselves told, is that when this baby was born, he was clutching a clot of blood in his tiny fist. To them, it was an omen. It was like he entered this violent world already grasping the very essence of power.
And this is the question I want you to keep in the back of your mind through all of this. Seriously. In a world with no safety net, where the rules have completely broken down, where your survival and your family's survival depend only on you, would you make the choices he's about to make?
Because this is where it gets really interesting. Genghis Khan's empire wasn't just built on ambition. Every major idea, every key part of his government and military can be traced directly back to a specific traumatic wound he got before he was even 20 years old. Let's map it out.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It is relentless. At 9, his dad is poisoned. Right after that, his own clan just abandons his family to starve. By 12, he's killing his own half-brother in a desperate fight for control. At 16, he's hunted down and enslaved, literally with a wooden collar around his neck. And then at 17, just when he's starting to build a life, his new wife is kidnapped. This isn't just a tough upbringing, it's a furnace, burning away any trust he had in the way the world was supposed to work.
So that first wound, being abandoned by his clan, was maybe the most important one. It taught him a huge lesson. The whole system of blood loyalty, the very social fabric of the steppe, was worthless. It failed him. So what did he do? He decided he was going to tear it all down and build something new. He created a system where it didn't matter who your dad was. Your clan meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was how good you were and how loyal you were directly to him. This wasn't some philosophical choice. It was a survival strategy born from total betrayal.
And this pattern just repeats itself. Every wound becomes a weapon. When his wife Berti is kidnapped, he's totally powerless. He has to go beg for help. He swears he will never be that weak again. The solution? The decimal army, a perfectly organized military based on units of 10, 100, and 1,000. It replaced the messy and unreliable clan system forever. His dad was poisoned by enemies pretending to be guests. The lesson? Even tradition can be a weapon. The solution? The Great Yasa, a single universal law code for everyone that made betrayal a crime punishable by death. Trauma, tool, wound, weapon, over and over again.
Okay, so we've seen what happened to him and why it shaped him. But now, let's get into the how. What was the psychological operating system running inside his head that let him not just survive all that, but go on to conquer the entire known world?
First thing, and you have to get this to get him, he was a true believer. His religion was Tengrism, the worship of the eternal blue sky, Tengri. And for him, this wasn't just politics. The sources are pretty clear. Genghis Khan sincerely believed that he had a divine mission from heaven to unite the entire world under one rule. And think about it, if you believe you're getting your orders straight from God, you don't compromise. Your mission is absolute. Anyone who gets in your way isn't just an enemy, they're a heretic, defying the will of heaven itself.
Second, his famous brutality wasn't random madness. It was cold, hard logic. You can actually look at it through the lens of game theory. His massacres were what we'd call a credible commitment. By wiping out one city that fought back, he made his threat to the next city 100% believable. Surrender or die became a real choice, not a bluff. It was brutal, but it often convinced other cities to give up without a fight, which actually saved Mongol lives. He was also a master of information asymmetry. His spies would pose as merchants for years inside a kingdom before he invaded, mapping everything out. He always knew more about them than they knew about themselves. And he perfected brinkmanship with tricks like the feigned retreat, using an enemy's own arrogance to lure them into a perfect trap.
All of this points to a concept from dark psychology called strategic empathy. Now, this has nothing to do with sympathy or feeling sorry for your enemy. No. This is the cold, calculated ability to get so deep inside your opponent's head that you understand their culture, their fears, and their pride better than they do. And he used this to turn their own societies against them, fanning the flames of civil wars, promising freedom to oppressed groups, dismantling them from the inside long before his army ever showed up.
So that operating system explains how he won. But to see the bigger historical forces, the kind of pattern that repeats across centuries and continents, we need a different perspective. And one of the most powerful ways to understand a guy like Genghis Khan comes not from Europe or Asia, but from a 14th century genius in North Africa.
The concept is called asabiyyah. The thinker is Ibn Khaldun. And his theory was that history moves in cycles. You have these tough, hungry people from the frontiers who develop an intense group loyalty, that's asabiyyah, because they have to rely on each other to survive. This lean, unified group then comes and conquers a rich, settled empire that has grown soft and lazy and divided. Its people have lost their asabiyyah. But then the cycle just starts all over again. The conquerors get comfortable, their kids get soft, and a few generations later, a new, hungry group with high asabiyyah comes and conquers them.
Now, Ibn Khaldun's theory describes the Mongols perfectly. But what's really mind-blowing is that this pattern isn't unique. Let's do a callback to our very first explainer in this series, Shaka Zulu. 600 years after Genghis Khan, on a completely different continent, Shaka follows the exact same template. Both were outsiders, both destroyed the old clan system and built a new military based on merit. Both used strategic terror to build their state, and both of their empires fell apart right after they died, because the whole thing was built on personal loyalty to one guy. You see, this is not a coincidence. It's like a recurring psychological blueprint for how absolute outsiders, people forged in trauma with nothing to lose, can completely remake the world by creating a new kind of intense, unified group.
So after all the conquests, all the terror, all the lawmaking, what was the legacy? What kind of world did this mind actually end up building?
Well, his legacy is just this massive, unsettling paradox. On one hand, you get the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace, the largest free trade zone in history, which connected China and Europe and sparked a huge transfer of ideas and technology. On the other hand, those exact same trade routes carried the Black Death, which killed millions. He created the idea of diplomatic immunity, but his grandson's armies burned Baghdad's House of Wisdom to the ground, maybe ending the Islamic Golden Age. The contradictions are just staggering, and they're still with us. Today, something like 16 million men are his direct descendants.
So why did this empire, built by a genius, fall apart so fast? Well, let's go back to Plato one last time. Plato said governments decay in a predictable cycle. An empire built on military honor and merit, what he called a timocracy, is strong. That's a perfect description of Genghis Khan's empire. But Plato predicted that it would eventually decay into an oligarchy,
rule by the wealthy kids of the founders who care more about their own power and money than about honor. And that's exactly what happened. His sons and grandsons started fighting over the inheritance, the empire broke apart, that intense group solidarity, the asabiya, was lost, and the whole thing collapsed from the inside.
Which brings us to our final question. We've seen the wounds that created him. We've seen the weapons he made from that pain. We've analyzed his operating system of divine belief and calculated terror and universal law. So after this journey inside his mind, what's the verdict? Was Genghis Khan a monster who built his throne on the bones of civilization, or was he simply the only man brutal enough to build the world we actually live in?